Hello and welcome to episode 60 of the Tomato Timer. And I'm so excited to invite a fellow Diana Legacy Award recipient and friend, Alex Anderson, to the episode. Alex is a neurodiversity ambassador and works as a logistics supplier at the Royal Air Force. And it's so good to have you. Hi, Alex. How are you?
Very good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good too, thank you. Christmas Eve, right?
Indeed. That
Thank
merry
you so
time
much
of
for
year.
finding the time. Alex, I wanted to talk a little bit about I guess your journey through the education system, finding out about your conditions and how that shaped your journey and what it means to be on a neurodiverse person.
Of course. Well, it's a bit of a. I went through a lot of hardships when I was younger through the education system. They
Mm,
didn't understand what I was from my earlier years, so there was a lot of difficulties from the age of 7 to 9. I went through 4 schools.
wow.
The time I reached 11 in the end, because they didn't diagnose me at the start, so it was just labelled as a naughty child. Because I would act out because I didn't develop the coping mechanisms in order to sort of function well
Hmm.
within society. And as a result of that, it was just a label of, well, he's just misbehaving. And sadly, that was how I was sort of treated. So with Asperger's myself at the time, it's very sensory, as you don't want people sort of going near you. Sometimes you need that emotional sort of space away.
Hmm.
And if they thought you were being naughty, they'd just restrain you, which is very well. It's not very good because it's a sensory overload because you're someone coming into your personal space. It's very difficult, and then as a result, my behaviour would get worse
Yeah.
because what I needed was that space and time. But so I went through a few schools at that sort of time period because it was just sort of put me through one school with individuals who did have behavioural difficulties, and with Asperger's, we can do this thing called mirroring. So when I see other people behave in a certain way, I learn to sort of assimilate that behaviour
Okay.
at the time, because that was what I thought would be normal. That's not so good when it's bad behaviour.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was a very difficult time generally for sort of my family and myself. But then on the plus side, I managed to go to a school called the John Frost High School, which had a specialist autism spectrum base, which helped me develop my coping mechanisms and work with me to sort of give me that exposure to how I should be behaving, and if I do have any difficulties, how you deal with it instead of sort of walking out of the room, being able to sort of compose yourself and sort of manage it and stay there at the same time. As you can realize, I can't just, as I get older and do meetings, well, I've had enough now and just walk out. Doesn't,
Well, you can just click leave the room, right?
yeah, it just doesn't tend to end well. So so yeah,
Yeah.
the biggest thing's coping mechanisms. And so when I got my diagnosis, it was a lot better because they knew exactly what I had, and then
Hmm.
how they allowed me to sort of develop and learn from that was sort of working with that condition, because they knew what I could do or what I couldn't do. And it was just gradual exposure to different sort of stresses of sort
Hmm.
of everyday life to sort of prepare me for the future when I won't have that sort of safety net. And that's sort of luckily where I sort of flourished from that point, really. And with that right support, I was at the worst point told I was going to be in the Youth Offenders Institute by the time I was 16. And
Gosh.
then I finished school in the top 8 highest achievers for my year. So
Amazing.
it's that, it just, for me, it just underlines that point of, with that right support, you can achieve anything.
Hmm. And you say that it's a condition rather than a disability. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I'm quite passionate on that statement because
Mm,
condition for me, it's something that you will never it never disappears. You just got to learn to live with it. I think disability for me, it's it sort of says to me personally that I can't do something because of, you've got this, so you can't do X, Y, and Z. But so far in my life, there's never been something that, because I'm very much stubborn. If I want to do something, I get it done.
mhm.
And as a result of that, there's nothing so far that I haven't been able to do. And as such, I don't like calling it a disability, because to
Yeah.
me that sort of indicates that I can't do something, and it's not about can't doing. doing what I want to do. It's more a case of I may not be able to do it this way, but I can do it this way. There's plenty of
Absolutely.
ways of achieving your goals in life, and I
Yeah.
use condition because I think it stops that label of negativity, thinking, oh well, he's got autism, he can't do this, he can't do that. So the biggest thing is just to sort of show that you may have this, but that should never stop you thinking that you can do anything.
Hmm. And for you, you mentioned how support was such a critical uh, part of your journey, and how it shifted from kind of like those really hard times to something that allowed you to flourish. And even then, though, the support came quite late, right? How is our education system currently structured to give the support that's required for every student, essentially?
I think it's a little difficult at the moment because you've got to have sort of cross party in terms of both from the parents and the education system to get a
Mm,
diagnosis and to get the right support that's needed. Some parents as well, they're very sort of anti getting a diagnosis because they worry about their child having a label.
mhm,
And that can sadly impact individuals getting the right support they need. But with the education system, depending as well, it can be very reluctant on initially getting diagnosis because it's more funding that has to be put into that individual,
yeah.
which can provide issues, sadly. And it is a barrier because mum had to fight to get me diagnosed because mum knew that something was there. But I was very lucky. My mum supported me and sort of worked with me to work out what it was so we
Mhm,
could get that right support in place. But sadly, not everyone is like that. And at the moment, where the education system fails, is you've got to fight for everything. And parents potentially who aren't able to maybe provide that sort of level of fight for their child are then failed. And as a result of that, their child has failed because they can't get the right support because potentially their voices aren't loud enough, which is terrible. But sadly, that is the current sort of framework of education because it is sort of every individual you've got mainstream, and then anything additional tends to be you have to justify or fight for it to be able to get anything granted.
mm. And unfortunately, such a vicious cycle as well, right? Because once something isn't the support isn't given, then it just continues to detriment, spirals out of control. And that's so unfortunate for so many young people who all they required was the right type of support and the right type of recognition, versus incorrect labels and boxing them away.
Well, interestingly enough, in my case, at the very start, I think around the age of 6, they had an idea that I potentially had Asperger syndrome. That was in my first school.
Okay.
But it took 2 more schools before they even diagnosed me because giving me that diagnosis puts risk assessments and all of the other idiosyncrasies of keeping me within education, providing the right support, and it's all funding, which um, again you have to fight for it.
Mm,
It's not freely given. It's very much a very difficult battle. And again, I'm very very lucky that I've had a mum who has fought that battle, which was very taxing, I must say.
yeah.
And you can completely see why people get disheartened.
Absolutely. And we're talking about, like, I know that there's so many challenges just within the the UK education system when it comes to these things. But looking even more broadly internationally, there are certain systems which are still incredibly stubborn and unrecognizing uh, these conditions, and they're not providing that level of support. And what about those parts of the world which are under resourced even for the mainstream, and they're unable to provide the funding which is required for additional support? So it is a mammoth of a task. But I know that you've been, as an ambassador, as a spokesperson, as an advocate, you've been championing neurodiverse people and inclusion, and you've been making changes happen. So tell me a little bit about, like, now you've gone through school, you've just finished, came out in the top 10% of your school, of your class, and now you're heading into the world. And what are you doing now?
So I'm currently working within the Royal Air Force as a logistics supplier.
Hmm.
Um, I work with the Chinook Force, which is rotary helicopters,
Okay,
which is very interesting,
I
very
can
sort of
imagine.
dynamic job role. And for me, it's the structure. I thought military would be a good fit for me because it is it's the structure, it's routine, it's a lot of things which people with autism spectrum sort of thrive upon. because it's very regimented, and we know exactly what we're doing when we're doing it, which
Yeah.
can be very sort of very good, and sort of keeps a lot more sort of calm, control, composure, because you know what's going to happen day to day. So there is no sort of extreme surprise or shock, because that can be very much problematic for individuals on the autism
Mhm.
spectrum.
But you caused a change to happen in how people are can recognize in the armed forces, right?
Yes, well, to be fair, at the time when I joined, a lot of the forces, army, for instance, there's a carpet blank ban is in terms of no, because you have ASD, there's no chance that we'll let you in. The only force that was going to let me have a look in potentially on case by case basis was the Royal Air Force, and I
Mhm.
had to do a very long-winded process of going through. But then being able to go in as someone who has autism spectrum, I've been able to set that precedent and sort of show that even with that, I've gone in, I've saved the RF millions of pounds by being very
Wow.
systematic, being able to go through processes, and to be able to sort of see correlations between data and work out where assets go, for instance. And being able to set that precedent now, all of the armed forces have gone to case by case basis, and sort of they have given that diversity and inclusion. As a result, every young person is now able to put their case forwards to go into the armed forces, because my personal feelings on it were, if you are wrong for that job, then I completely understand. If it's not for you, then
Mhm.
fair enough. But if an individual is just not given a chance, they won't even get a look in on paper because they've got a label. To me, I took issue with that, because that is discrimination. Um,
Absolutely.
and but to be fair, since sort of I've gone in, I've been able to prove that I'm able to operate within that environment. That has become a lot more accessible to loads of young people now. So anyone who does want to have that opportunity now has it, and I'm very grateful for that. And sort of, yeah, I'm very proud to say I was part part of the part of the hard work that went in to make that happen.
We are all very proud, and it's an incredible achievement, one that will affect so many more after you as well. Have you heard back from anyone after those changes were instated to in other kind of recruits who were able to come in because of your change?
Yeah, well, interestingly, I keep a bit of a social media presence online, to sort of share my story, and if people need someone to go to help
Mhm.
them, especially with their application processes for any of the armed forces,
Mhm.
I've tried my best to be open and to be as supportive as I can. And I had a few individuals sort of speak to me, like private messaging me, or parents private messaging me, and I've been very fortunate in being able to provide them with the support they needed, and many of them from that support, because sadly there isn't a lot of support in place, but because
Mhm.
I've been there and bought that t-shirt, as the saying goes,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
able to sort of give that first-hand experience of what to expect and how they can tackle each stage of the selection so that they do achieve their intended job role. And from that, loads of them managed to get their start dates, which is absolutely amazing. And
Yeah.
I've had them sort of message me back saying a massive thank you, or parents messaging me back saying, "You've inspired my son. He's got a start date now. He's going in." And for me, that's what it's all about. It's the
Yeah.
next generation after me. It's that it is the legacy of being able to. I've done it, but now I shouldn't be the only one. Every individual can go on and do it. If I can do it, anyone can do it.
Alex's legacy, it's incredibly heartwarming. You mentioned in a couple sentences earlier, you talked about the fact that this regimented, structured approach was very beneficial for the way you thought and the way you thrived essentially. Tell me a little bit about that, because another thing I remember you telling me in passing was you're someone who put his head down and really got to work. You could work for hours and hours without stopping, and you're able to produce something really well. So how just could you like share your experiences when you get a task, how it feels like and how you're approaching it?
Okay. Well, with me, I'm very systematic. So how I plan a task out is was that start, middle, and finish.
Mm,
So I like to see a task grow. I never like to finish something halfway, because I describe it as a wavelength. Because when I'm on that wavelength, I'm in the zone. I want to get it done there, and then
yeah.
I know what I want to do. I know what I need to do it, and then I will finish it. However, I find once I start a job and I get maybe 75% through, and then something else comes on and I have to do that. I find I struggle to sort of fit back into that original job.
Yeah.
Because my wavelength has then gone on to something else. So for me, it's always that I've started it, get it done, sorted, so file it onto the next thing. So with me, routine, that's how I work in terms of when I get a task, I like to tackle it that way. And that, to be fair, in a job, that can't always happen because priorities change, and as you know as well. But it's sort of being able to measure that and sort of be able to tolerate being able to sort of be flexible between what jobs you do. But within my role, I've had a lot of experience with that, and I've had to develop part of that myself to be able to go to a next job. If it's urgent, that needs doing, then that job needs doing. So be able to go between. But so regimented for me is sort of very clearly outlined what you need to do. If there's any sort of struggles that you're not understanding, there are documents in place which are sort of step-by-step guides of how to achieve those jobs or tasks. And for me, that's very beneficial, because if I have any lack of clarity on a task, I can literally go straight through, right, I've done that part, what do I do next? Okay, it's that line. Just for me, I find that it makes it a lot easier to sort of navigate and be able to perform that role effectively. So that's probably it.
Amazing. But I wonder whether you would, and I have no measurements to back it up, but would you say that you maybe even be more productive than others who have to, who may not be as concentrated, as diligent as you are? And forgive me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but would potentially the not calling it disability, but actually calling it a superpower, because you're actually able to do something which others in the mainstream education system, or mainstream, if we refer to say, spectrum, find it more difficult to concentrate for long periods of time, or to identify certain patterns, or to see discrepancies in large sets of data?
It's a difficult question. I guess
It
for
is.
me, I've always been the way I am, and I don't sort of measure myself off other people.
Okay.
That's just generally me. I think you could say that within any job role, you're always going to find there are some individuals who will do above and beyond, and some individuals who are quite happy to stamp in and stamp out. But that is the same with every job.
True.
And in my case, I may be able to do a bit more work than other individuals, but I don't think that sort of reflects badly. I think it's just a case of because of how fast I can process things, sometimes that, as you say, maybe it can be seen as a superpower, as I can maybe be a bit more productive in some regards. But yeah, it's part and parcel of every job. You get a variety of people that work with you from all different walks of life, with different paces, different processing speeds. But yeah, that's probably my honest opinion. I think I can't sort of honestly say a certain individual I do 10 times more than, because that's not fair in terms of I can't honestly judge.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am the way I am, and then some people like it, some people maybe not so much, because it may create more work down the line. But but
We love it.
it's just one of those. I'd
Yeah.
rather I operate off empty desk policy. So if there's something there, get it done. Don't wait until next week. It's there, bang, sorted, on to the next thing. That's how I work. It's
Yeah.
just my mind, how it sort of engages.
What about the kind of the broader kind of area of diversity and inclusion, and your efforts of championing and advocating for the inclusion of neurodiverse people? How is that going beyond the army and beyond your day-to-day job? And at a global scale, what challenges do you foresee, and how do we start to kind of fix them and ensure there is inclusivity everywhere?
I think the biggest issue I think at the moment is the negative stigma behind the label of getting
Mm,
autism diagnosed. To give you a statistic, only 22% of the young people with Asperger's and ASD actually get full-time employment. So
gosh,
not a great figure in my
not at
opinion,
all.
and it's a figure I'd like to tackle within my lifetime, because an individual with ASD may not be right for a certain job, but their skill
Mhm,
set may put them perfectly in mind for another role. So one of
mhm.
my sort of my colleagues from when I was in school, um, really intelligent, loved playing Angry Birds, ASD I should say. But just because he could, he managed to hack into NASA just because he was really sort of brainy. He just thought, oh, I'll do that today, and just did it. Uh,
Mm.
bit sort of he didn't do anything, but it was just the fact that he could do it.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I think this, for me, I just don't feel that it's fair that an individual gets written off because they may not be right for one job, but there are plenty of jobs out there that sort of will lend to their skill sets. And I think that opportunity, hopefully, and sort of awareness is the biggest one, because
Mm.
a lot of companies, admittedly, when they see Asperger's ASD, they may start thinking, oh, well, what are we going to have to put into place? What sort of money are we going to have to spend to accommodate this person? And that can sometimes provide a negative impact. But they may not need to even provide anything, because if the job role fits that sort of that mindset of the individual, they may be absolutely perfect for that job. I think it's a lot of it is just to sort of break down the negativity of the label, because
Yeah.
a lot of people who hear it, it is that, oh, he's got this, or it's a, it's like a bit of it's a taboo subject, I think, with some people, because
Yeah.
they don't
Yeah.
actually look at what that actually means. It's just that, oh, it's negative, negative. And I think for me, it's like a lot of companies are missing out on people who would be absolutely amazing
Incredible talent.
because of that. So yeah, that's my personal sort of goal for the future, is to sort of look at policy on how we can develop more
Okay.
inclusion and diversity, and potentially go into some form of local politics to see if I can be a part of championing that a bit further, so I can be hands-on with policy making. Once I finish my career with the RAF, that's sort of my future ambition for the future.
Okay. What do you think about the current kind of trends and direction that the world's heading towards? Are you seeing changes happen, especially in the last, 5, 10 years of being in this space and feeling the challenges that have come out of it? Are you seeing changes happen at corporate and governmental levels?
Yeah, at the end of the day, a lot more inclusion is happening. For instance, with forces, there was no opportunity for any individual to go into the
Mhm.
forces, and you can imagine how many job roles that an individual with ASD could fit into within the forces, whether that be
Mhm.
computer based, supply based, or engineering, whatever. But that is a massive market now, where individuals, if they've got the right experience, skills, and knowledge, that they can fit into. There are improvements constantly happening. It's one of those. It won't happen overnight, as with all things.
Yeah.
It will
Yeah.
be sort of taking chunks at a time out of the
Yeah.
system to make more inclusion and diversity. But I think the biggest thing is education, and sort of showing people that it isn't that negative stigma. That it's like, again, labels, they can be a good thing because they provide you with the help, but there's a lot of hindrance, sadly, at the moment still. Because from getting the diagnosis, even though I was able to access the help, it hindered me in other areas. So I had to battle a bit more to be able
Yeah.
to do certain things that maybe an individual from mainstream wouldn't have had to worry about. Um, so I think that's sort of in the longer term, definitely it is getting better. I can see a lot of visible changes within government.
Mhm.
I think, again, it is worldwide, so it's something that every government will have to continually keep developing. But it is my sort of dream that in the future there won't be any hindrance, and everyone sort of will be judged fairly, no matter who they are or what their condition is. Because it should not be a hindrance, and that is my dream for the future, is to sort of make that make a more inclusive world.
Absolutely. Um, Alex, you're inspiring, and it always warms my heart to speak with you. And I wanted to kind of bring our episode to an end by asking you, well, by identifying that, even out there today listening to our episode, and there are people who may realize that they're facing certain conditions, they may be labeled, they may not be, they may feel like they're not fitting in the mainstream. um, and they may be scared of what it's like to, or they may be already facing discrimination because of the conditions that they have. What do you say to them? How would you kind of like inspire them? How would you advise them and kind of like give them strength?
Okay, well, my slogan I've always used is never let a label define you. I've gone
Mhm.
through difficult times, and don't get me wrong, they do sort of take a lot out of you, sort of
Mhm.
emotionally and physically. But it's about sort of being able to keep digging, and knowing that you will get where you want, as long so with that right support you can achieve anything you want to, and with the right people around you. and anything is possible. But yeah, my biggest sort of my catchphrase is just never let a label define you, and you can do anything. You can do anything, and that I firmly believe that, and hopefully I can inspire many other young people to feel exactly the same way.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Likewise, thank you for having me.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.